Yep.
Righty, and all right, so everybody, thank you so much for being here with us. We've got Mayor Lee, Vice Mayor Cobb, City Manager Bob Cowell, and we also have Abby Hamilton from the United Way of Roanoke Valley. She's in the hot seat of the guest seat this week, and she's going to have a lot of great information to be able to share with everyone. So Mayor Lee, go ahead and kick us off.
Thank you, Tiffany. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad you could join us. Even though our current focus must be on our health, physical distancing, limited gatherings, and so on, Roanoke will eventually be given the signal to begin reopening our local economy. With this in mind, the city has started the process to prepare for this reopening. We have established working groups that will focus on gathering information about financial resources that may aid in recovery, determine how to prepare municipal facilities for safe reopening and programming, assist vulnerable members of our community, and look for ways we can support small businesses as we collect and assess information about local economic conditions. Each of these working groups will enable us to fine tune our approach to support the community during recovery. Working with our community partners, we have already provided $117,000 to assist small businesses, and we have identified an additional $250,000 with more funding to follow. We continue to coordinate our response and preparations with neighboring localities and our community partners. And we have some tremendous community partners, which include United Way, Virginia Career Works, the Small Business Development Center, TAP, and the Roanoke Regional Partnership. And even though planning for recovery is appropriate, nothing is more critical at this time than addressing the virus itself. Two of the most important tools in that battle are testing and contact tracing. From the White House to our local health department, all agree these tools are essential for us to be able to safely reopen our community. Current levels of testing and contact tracing, which is so important, are inadequate and must be addressed. To that end, I'm pleased to say that Council has authorized a letter under my signature to state and federal elected officials outlining the significance of testing and tracing and the need for more. I am pleased to see that the most recent congressional COVID aid funding passed by the Senate includes substantial funding to address those needs. This is the type of action needed to help us safely, and I emphasize the word safely, reopen our communities. And at this time, I'm pleased to recognize the Vice Mayor Cobbs.
Thank you, Mayor Lee. I want to take a few moments to share with you all a couple of important initiatives we have undertaken to show our support for all those engaged in delivery of essential services here in the city. The City of Roanoke joined the Light It Up Blue campaign last week as a way to honor and support healthcare workers and essential personnel during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Working with Carilion Clinic, Poe and Kronk, and the owners of the Wells Fargo Tower, Roanoke showed its support by lighting the Roanoke Star, Berglund Center, and Wells Fargo Tower in blue. This recognition was so well received by the community that the decision was made to continue to participate through the remainder of the month. And it's been amazing to see local businesses as well as homeowners putting blue lights around their buildings and on their porches to participate in this effort. Even in the midst of responding to the coronavirus, we continue to ensure our actions and those of organizations we support align with our strategic priorities. So we want to share with the community that even during these challenging times, there are so many good and important things being done and happening within each of our city's 7 priority areas. And those areas include education, human services, community safety, infrastructure, economy, good government, and livability. Starting next week, we will be posting on our website and social media accounts short videos featuring the mayor and members of City Council, highlighting these initiatives and activities that are taking place in these areas. It's our sincere hope that these videos and the initiatives they highlight will be encouraging and will illustrate the creativity of our city government and community in meeting our needs during these challenging times. One of the best examples I can think of is how our United Way of the Roanoke Valley is responding to the many challenges facing our community, quickly pulling together dozens of partners and rapidly raising the funds needed to support their efforts to strengthen our health and integrity and support during this crisis. So it's my honor to welcome Abby Hamilton, who is the president and CEO of United Way of Roanoke Valley, who is with us today to share with us some of these efforts and how folks in the community can be able to get involved and help during this crisis. Welcome, Abby.
Thank you so much, Mayor Lee, Vice Mayor Cobb, City Manager Bob Cowell, and the leadership over at the City of Roanoke. It's such an honor to be able to join you today and really talk about really the highlight and what makes the Star City as special as it is even during this crisis. And it really is highlighting the work and the collaborative effort of so many partners in the community that's making things happen for people and ensuring that the most vulnerable among us receive the service that they need during this time of crisis, and even giving them the support that they need to recover in the months and weeks and months to come. And so this is really, I get to speak and brag about stuff, but the work is really happening because of the magic and the selfless acts of service that people out in the front lines from many agencies are doing day in and day out. As Vice Mayor Cobb said, I want to thank him for participating at these meetings every week also, and being a voice both for citizens and making sure that we take information back from those that are on the ground so that we can really pursue solutions in partnership with local government. This is a great demonstration of how a crisis like this not only brings people who have services, but also the beauty of mingling that with the importance of local government investment and from business as well. So as Vice Mayor alluded to, United Way has been working with so many partners. We have maybe close to 100 people that are joining us on a weekly basis for touch base efforts on key community needs, such as accessing PPEs and healthcare supplies, making sure that we have adequate testing, and also health education information that's being circulated throughout the community. We want to make sure that food access is front and center, because families get hungry and they need to be fed every single day. And so how do we make sure that we are taking and mapping the distribution points and doing this in concert with Feeding Southwest Virginia, Leap for Local Foods, our various soup kitchens and food pantries, with the school system, with various churches that are also wanting to do that, and ensuring that as we map out the distribution points, we're also identifying where the gaps might be and pivoting very quickly to ensure that nobody's falling through the cracks, right? We've been working with various childcare providers on the front of providing childcare support for essential workers. And really the great resource for people to be able to do that is to go to Virginia Childcare Aware, which is a central repository of information statewide of what is still open. And then here in the Roanoke Valley, we had a great resource called smarttostart.org, which has been launched in partnership with all of our local school systems in the region, Head Start and private childcare providers, so that families that still need to work and are needing childcare can be directed to childcare centers that are still open. And so therefore it's a win-win for the families needing care and also for the businesses themselves that also need the clientele to be able to stay open. We're also working with the great partnership of our housing and homeless service providers through the Blue Ridge Continuum of Care, so that we are able to prevent homelessness during this time period with support from our utility providers, and also making sure that those that are finding themselves in a situation of housing instability have access to health care and have a safe place to go while they're under investigation or under monitoring. I think one of the things that we as a community need to think about, and as citizens need to think about as we begin to reopen our economies, is also be thinking about the access to low or no cost accounts that are tied to our financial institutions. So why is that important? In times of crisis, we probably, one of the first things in our mind is how do we make sure that we have access to liquid assets, right? So in order for a lot of people to be able to receive the relief funds that are coming from the federal government, it's important for people to be able to have these accounts so that they can be fast-tracked. And so this is why partnerships like Bank on Roanoke Valley, which again is in partnership with the city and our financial institutions and credit unions in the area, are offering these low and no cost products. So I encourage people to kind of go to the Bank on Roanoke Valley site on the United Way website for more information. Again, as people are struggling in the next few weeks, you're probably thinking, where do I get help? What do I do if I need to talk to somebody? This is why an important resource like 211 is in place, not just here locally, but statewide, so that citizens have the ability to talk to somebody that can connect them with health and human services in the area. There's also a great amount of resources on the United Way website that will give you some information on resources that are available here in our community. Lastly, United Way has also launched the COVID-19 Community Response Fund, and it's really for the purpose of supporting the work of nonprofit partners that are in the front lines serving families that have been impacted directly by this crisis. And to date, we have raised $86,000, a little over $86,000, and we have begun opening the application process for agencies to begin accessing that funding. That funding is really intended to meet current urgent needs and immediate needs, and then as funding allows, addressing intermediate and even recovery needs down the road. We have to date received applications from 12 agencies that are totaling over $150,000. So obviously there is a disparity between funds that are available and what is needed on the ground. So there is still plenty of opportunity to be able to support and give to that fund. You can easily do that by texting UWRV to 85511. And I will be shameless in also mentioning that we have some great corporate sponsors that are leading this community effort, in addition to the very generous individuals that have given to this fund. AEP Foundation, Delta Dental Foundation, the Community Foundation serving Western Virginia, the Western Virginia Water Authority, Truist, which is formerly SunTrust and BB&T, Anthem, and Burns McDonnell. There's still room for many other corporate sponsors to join us because the need is great, but I think the light that shines brightly during times of need is really the spirit of collaboration and the spirit of generosity that is inherent to our community. So again, I want to thank everybody for letting me join today, and I will turn it back over to the mayor.
Hey, Gabby, that's a great report. That's a great report, and that's real good news in these times that we're going through right now. So thank you for the work that you're doing, and I'm very pleased to see the vice mayor is part of what's going on down there. He does a great job in keeping up with issues and things that go on in the community and working and caring. So that's good news. It's good news. And I will now turn remaining of our press conference over to our city manager, Mr. Bob Cowell.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, thank you, Vice Mayor and Abby, certainly for all of the information that you all provided and for joining with us and continuing every week to share information with our residents that hopefully they find important. At this point, as is typically our tradition here, as we've gone through these things, is we will now open it up for questions that folks might have from the media. And I know Tiffany also monitors Facebook if there are any questions in there that we need to do as well. So I'm going to let, usually we have Tiffany read these off and then we'll sort of divvy up the answers as we go forward. So.
All right, so we're going to start with Ryan right now. So this is kind of a long one, so I'm going to try to paraphrase it. And you guys might be able to see it in your chat as well if you open up the chat icon. But it says, HUD has provided a little more than $1 million in community development block grants to the city, funded by the coronavirus relief bill signed into law at the end of March. I understand about $528,000 will be spent on streetscaping along Melrose Avenue from 21st to 24th Streets using HUD's community development block grants. During an interview a short time ago with Dr. Ben Carson, the federal HUD secretary, he told WFXR that using the funds for such project was not the intent of the coronavirus relief bill. Can the city manager explain this project and how it meets the secretary's stated mission for relief funds from the CARES Act to help those negatively impacted by the COVID-19 crisis?
And yeah, thank you. And I think it's actually important to remember that there actually are right now, which is very unusual for us, there are two pots of community development block grant funds. So there are those normal funds that we get allocated each year, and for us that's somewhere around I think $1.5 million that we put toward projects such as these. And those projects will continue to go forward, and that funding will continue to go forward. We have also received, as was mentioned, the CARES Act funding, which is about the equivalent amount. It's almost double. We now have almost double of what we typically would have. We are still working through actually what is the guidance that is to accompany that funding. That funding actually won't get programmed until with our budget approval in June. So it'll actually come a bit later. So we actually, I think the amount that was cited is actually the amount that's in the existing pot of money that goes toward the work that we've been doing in the Melrose Orange target area and is not yet a part of the CARES Act. I will say that Dr. Carson's information, while helpful, may not be completely aligned with what it is that the HUD guidance is that comes out. With HUD CDBG funding, even the CARES funding, at least as it's been presented so far, only a portion of it actually can be used for social services or human services, and the other portion actually has to be used for community development activities. And so that's a piece that we're trying to work through and figure out as well. But again, the only funding out of the CARES Act so far that has been programmed is the action that the council took on Monday, which was actually to free up funding tied with the homelessness assistance, which we're using to ensure that there's housing for any homeless individuals that actually have to self-quarantine or self-isolate. So the other part of the funding, the CDBG funding, is still yet to be finalized and presented for public hearing, and that won't happen until May or June as we go through. So hopefully that answers an element of that question. So thank you.
All right, who else? What other questions do you all have for our esteemed panel?
And Abby, you haven't been on this, so this is usually the awkward part where we wait to see them pop up and stuff. So
Everybody's being pretty quiet today. Anyone?
Not getting any questions. So Abby, let me ask you as well on the United Way part of things. So you might want to explain, since I have the advantage of serving on the board with United Way, and of course, actually very similar to the CDBG question that was just asked, is a course, United Way has an annual campaign that goes on that the city is involved in as well. And that's to raise funds for all of the always occurring needs that are in our community. So if you wouldn't mind helping share kind of how those funds are continuing to be used in our community alongside the Community Response Fund projects that are coming forward.
Sure. So this is great. So the information, specifically the entire packet of information that provides guidance on the administration of the COVID Community Response Fund is actually on our website. So I encourage you to kind of get some information there if you're really interested. But the gist of it is the response funds are actually going to be handled separately from United Way's annual campaign. So if partners or any agencies don't need to be receiving money from United Way currently in order to access this pot of money. So if they're addressing any of the needs that have been identified within those categories that we know are existing right now, they have the ability to do that, and the eligibility for agencies are listed on the website. The other thing that is important to note is that the Community Response Fund, 100% of whatever we collect through that fundraising effort is really going towards supporting the nonprofits directly. And that's important to note. One thing that is very, very similar is that it's still going to be incredibly volunteer driven. So we have a team of people that we have just assembled to be part of that review process. We actually have a 15 team that's going to be looking at all of the requests that I mentioned earlier. And it is a regional effort involving all representation from all of our local governments, many of the key corporate sponsors that I mentioned earlier. Faith communities also represented in there. So we have a really strong group of people that are going to be looking and making decisions. And in addition to that, there's also an effort from United Way's end and also with Carillion to convene all of the other funders in the area, because I think this is relevant to Bob, to what you were talking about earlier, in that there's a lot of need. We each, as separate funders, and I'll put my funder hat on as United Way, we each have specific pots of money that may or may not have their own restrictions or specific guidance in terms of administering. And there's an incredible opportunity for funders in our area that are truly invested in making a difference in families and helping in the moment, and also as part of recovery, for us to be able to maximize those resources by really, talking to each other and finding out where pots of money are able to be spent, where we anticipate gaps or higher levels of need, and then kind of redirecting that funding where it's possible to those areas so that we don't unintentionally come up with gaps. So as the city manager mentioned, United Way will continue to support primarily a lot of our multi-year funded partners that are addressing holistic needs of families. So a combination of food, shelter, healthcare access, education at a family unit level. And then in addition, there are investments that are happening for safety net type of services through the COVID Response Fund and in partnership with a lot of funders in the area.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and let's see. Mike has a question. How difficult is it right now to acquire PPE for Roanoke Valley nonprofits, and how are those resources being found?
So, I love this question, because this was probably a question that we started answering back in March when there was truly like a shortage of it. And so one of the advantages that we've had working with local government units is ensuring that we are centralizing, first of all, any requests for PPEs that are being made through to the Virginia Department of Emergency Management. So in terms of accessing PPEs right now and N95s, very hard, very hard. And so there is one of the first efforts that we did was connecting with local representatives that have contacts at VDEM, so that we can, as a group of nonprofits that are needing some of these supplies, we can centralize that and make it more efficient, and then tap into a state or national stockpile that can begin bringing down some of those supplies. So it's not just PPEs, but also we have the VDEM has the ability to kind of connect us with some MREs that other agencies are able to use. So that was one of the first options that we looked at. The next option was to kind of source several private retailers or distributors that are available. If you all don't know, Harbor Freight was providing PPEs or selling PPEs directly to hospitals. We looked at, there's another company that's private company that's over in Martinsville that also has access to some of those. So sourcing private companies that were either willing to retail or do a wholesale access for agencies, and then connecting them with those resources. And now we've also kind of pivoted to identifying sources of DIY masks. So with this change in the CDC guidelines where we have to be able to wear masks out when we're out in public, there is a need now for some agencies, as they're continuing to operate and also being in contact with the public, to have some DIY masks. So we already have established through Hands on Blue Ridge an opportunity for people that are making masks, that would like to make masks, to connect with people and agencies that are needing masks for their own staff or for their clients. So those are kind of like the 3 strategies that we've put in place. And every week we kind of monitor that to say, okay, are we finding additional sources that we can connect partners to? And kind of, again, making an inventory during those weekly calls.
Yeah, and the mayor and the vice mayor will remember from last week when the fire chief was on, that, you know, as much as Abby has explained kind of the challenges that the nonprofits are experiencing, we all know from that conversation, similarly, those challenges are being faced even among our first responders. And you'll remember that, you know, there was discussion about the inability for them to secure the gowns that they need, and that they're actually using rain jackets in order to actually meet that that requirement. So it's something that I know is being felt throughout throughout the entire country as well, and everybody's trying to scramble to do the same kind of thing as well. So thank you, Abby. I appreciate that. Our own council member Trish White Boyd actually is monitoring us as well. So she actually asked a question. And her question has to do with really the airing of these press conferences, and whether there would be options for airing these briefings on a local TV station. And of course, I would offer that back out to our media partners. And I know many of them join us on this. Some of them have been streaming on Facebook Live, and certainly would ask them to follow up if there is the possibility to do any of these, or even a segment of these, actually live on TV. So certainly would throw that back to them and see if that option exists out there, because there are some folks who don't have access to Facebook or to our YouTube sites as well, and that's a way in which they certainly could avail themselves of the information that's being shared here as well.
All right, so hopefully our camera's not going to go crazy like it just did. But another question for Abby: have any of the nonprofit partners that have been attending those virtual United Way meetings dropped out because of financial difficulties of their own that you know of?
Oh boy. You know, I think what I find really commendable is that while there might have been either financial difficulties or just logistical difficulties of operating programs that have to be in front of people, some people or some agencies have actually redirected staff, right? So they're doing something else that can help people that are impacted. So while they might not be functioning in the traditional sense, they are still functioning. And I think even more exciting is when they're not functioning in their normal environments, they're still also joining these conversations. So they can also be resources for other partners. And sometimes it's really, I don't know, Vice Mayor, it's a good camaraderie and a peer support when those meetings happen, because the work is hard and people are kind of getting burnt out and sometimes discouraged when there are a lot of roadblocks. I also think about, so to answer directly that question, I cannot think of a single agency at the moment that has gotten to that point. I know that accessing the Paycheck Protection Program, and particularly the second round of relief funds, will be incredibly important for sustainability of a lot of our nonprofits moving forward. And so I'm looking forward to making sure that we do that. And in addition, I also know that there are so many funders right now who are providing a lot of flexibility on their grants, including United Way has done that and made that decision. And I know the Community Foundation is also helping support for nonprofits for general operations, so that during this time when funding may be low or our cash flow is not exactly what it used to be, that there is the ability to make sure that we sustain some of this important work happening in the community, not just for the short term, but for the long haul.
Yeah, and Abby, I would just add to that in addition to nonprofits redirecting their energies, many of them are able to do that within their existing missions. Trust House is a perfect example of that, becoming willing to change their housing dynamic to be a quarantine space should we have vulnerable homeless citizens that test positive that need that quarantine space. We're also seeing this in small businesses and in restaurants that are really looking creatively at what they can do with their product or new products that they can bring into the market to not only sustain them, but to sustain other small businesses and restaurants. And that kind of collaboration we're seeing happen in every sector of the life of the city. And it's really extraordinary to watch.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that, the Trust House one is a great example of all of those partnerships coming together and actually being able to leverage the funding that we're receiving from the federal government to try to help resolve this. We were able to quickly move to be able to make that happen, which at the beginning of it did not look like it was going to happen. It was difficult, and it was great for them to be able to step up and try to address that. Mayor, I was also wondering, not to again put you on the spot with this, but I know that there are members of various faith-based organizations that are joining in on the efforts associated with United Way. Are there similar kinds of conversations going on among clergy in the community about kind of unified ways in which to respond to the challenges that are confronting the community?
There have been, and I think it's still ongoing. The issue is somebody needs to pull them all together. Everybody is looking to do what they can do. And I think there's some good ideas, and there's some committed people that I get requests from all the time wanting to know what can they do to help. They want to do something. So I think we need to rally up and coordinate that some, but there has been discussions, and I think they just need some guidance on what to do and how they go about doing it.
Yeah, that's good to know, because I know, our faith-based organizations in this community are always at the forefront of response to folks that are struggling. And this has been a bit different because they themselves have had to figure out how to carry out their mission in a completely different way than they've had to. And I think now that most of them have gotten that part figured out, I would think that you would start to see more of them saying what the mayor just said, which is how do we get plugged in into that as well. So very good. Are there any other questions for any of the folks that have joined us? I'm not seeing any. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Abby, anything you want to add as we kind of wrap things up here?
I just want to re-emphasize pretty much the things I said earlier regarding our city and what we're trying to do, and to let some of the businesses know, and especially our small businesses, that we're moving forward on all of that things that can be done to help them. And I think we need to encourage them, and that we're preparing for that day to come, that when we will be prepared to get our economy rolling again. However, I always want to emphasize the point, we've got to deal with this virus, and the virus is pretty much going to dictate a lot of how we do it and when we do some things. But I'm just pleased with what the city is doing, and the letter that we sent up to our elected officials, from the vice president on down to our senators. And I think it's so important, and I think we're really headed in the right direction. And I think there's some good news, even in the midst of so much uncertainty. So, Bob, thank you and your staff for what you're doing and keeping up with those matters. And I'm hoping that that this word will get out to those in the community. And that's what we're hoping our media friends will do, and share that. So, but thank you all for all that you're doing. And again, Abby, thank you for your presence and what you're doing here. And you're not alone in this. We're all supporting you. And I think it's some good stuff that's going on here in Roanoke, and I'm pleased and proud to be a part of it.
Thank you. Vice Mayor, anything to add at the end?
No, just to agree with that, and appreciate how even in these strange times, everyone is really, I think we're all seeing each other differently and appreciating each other differently, and looking for truly creative ways to connect with each other in ways that we haven't before. And I think we're seeing the fruit of that. And I was just going to suggest that maybe Abby, you and Mayor Lee could organize a go-to meeting for faith communities as a way to share what you all are doing, and for the mayor to kind of guide that conversation, because I think he's right. I think faith communities are really looking for a way to contribute, not only within their own congregations, but to the greater good, because everyone is trying to find that sense of purpose and how to direct that energy. So that's just a suggestion.
I was going to say that as my wrapping up statement. I'm like, let's follow up on that, because I'd love it. And there's a great value in making sure that we tap into everybody's strengths at this time of crisis.
Abby, one last time, if a company wants to help your effort, or an individual, how do they actually do that?
All right. Well, for anybody watching and wants to sponsor or give to the Community Response Fund that's helping the entire region, you are able, the easiest way to do that is to text UWRV to 85511. You can also go to the United Way website, uwrv.org, to access other giving methods online, PayPal, Facebook, or by check. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.
All right, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.